While I'm busy in the greenhouse, Irene prepares the studio for some work. First, she needs to get a fire started in the stove.
Hey everybody, it's Irene with BrainStormAcres, and obviously today I'm in the studio. Now it's a little chilly outside, so I was just loading up the wood stove a little bit more. This studio does sort of stay above outside temperature, but not by a lot, so it's frequently, well, in the middle of the winter, it can be down in the 30s. I don't know how cold it is today actually in here. Doesn't seem too bad, but then the wood stove is cooking. It's damp right now because we've had some very odd weather the last couple of days. Big storm coming in from a combination of California and the Pacific Northwest. But honestly, we haven't had any measurable rain. It's been damp. We've had condensation on the steel roof of the house that has dripped off the gutters, so it's, or the eaves, or into the gutters, depending on where you are on the house. Plants are probably enjoying that along the foundation, but the weather station can't see any rain. And the soil just has picked up a little bit of moisture, but not like you'd get from a real rainstorm. Down south of us, there has been flooding. Some schools were closed today because of flooding. So, yeah, I won't say it missed us because it didn't miss us, but it's just making a mess in other ways. So when we get this kind of weather for extended periods of time, the house will cool down because we're passive solar, and normally we get quite a bit of heat from the heat of the sun, and that means we have to run the pellet stove more, and the solar system just doesn't even vaguely cut it, so that means we have to run the generator. Now we're good for a couple of days with this overcast, but it's been like this for days and days and days now. And we have, both Henry and I have things to do, and those things require electricity. Henry is off running errands today. He has taken 5 packages to the post office for me. He is also probably picking up, trying to think, might be a package for me at the mobile station. I forgot about that. And I know there's one at the post office, some of our regular stuff that we order by mail. But he is doing that, plus picking up prescriptions and all kinds of other stuff. So basically he's going to Flagstaff after he gets done in town, so he won't be around for a long, long time. So I am working down in the studio. I was down here earlier today a couple of times, and I did start up the wood stove at that point. So all I had to do when I restarted it right now was toss a couple more logs in on top of the coals, and they're already crackling over there. I can hear them. I've got some stuff polishing over here, so if you hear kind of a swoosh noise in the background, that's what that is. I'm polishing some chains and things that I made last night that I need for toiletry sets and needle cases. Now, what I wanted to show you today is a solution for some of the problems that jewelers are having right now. One of the things is we have always been able to buy inexpensive clasps that were sturdy and good looking and would hold up. And this year my selection that was available to me went from probably a dozen different styles and sizes and everything down to about 5. The prices they haven't doubled, but they have definitely gone up significantly. I will buy always in quantity, because if you buy just one thing, a lot of times, like if you buy one package of, say, depends on the packages, but say the package has 10 of it in it. If I buy one package, it might be, and I'm just throwing out a number, it might be $8 wholesale. But if I buy 3 of those instead, it might be $6.50. Now, that every little bit helps. So I always try and buy quantity when I can so that my profit margin can stay ahead of inflation as much as possible. But there are times when you're making something where being able to make your own clasp can make a big difference in your overhead. The type of clasp I'm going to make today is a simple hook, and this type of hook I have seen literally thousands of pieces of jewelry in museums around the world. They've been making the same sort of hooks. Oh, they were common in the Roman Empire and probably before then. So all I need to do is choose the appropriate metal for whatever I'm working with and bend it. Well, cut it and bend it. And then let me get started on it and I'll talk about it. I've got two different sizes of wire here. I've got 16 gauge and I've got 14 gauge. Now, I buy these from my supplier, Rio Grande Jewelry Supply in Albuquerque, who gives me nothing for mentioning their names, but I have been using them for a very long time. I ate a cashew before I came down, and I shouldn't have done that because I was sharing cashews with Jack, but now I've got the scratchiness in my throat, which is not good. Anyway, let me get a drink of water. Okay, so I have 14 gauge and 16 gauge. The trick with wire when you're buying it by gauge is that the larger the number, the smaller the wire. So my 16 gauge is going to be smaller than my 14 gauge, and those will be smaller than my 12s and 10s. By the time you get up to, let's see, what do I have hanging around here? This, which is a blank for a brooch, is that 4? Let me double check, so I'm not telling you a fib. Yeah, it's a 4. I was right. I was thinking it was 4. The gauges that I use all the time, I'm super familiar with. This is on the outside in terms of being large for the gauges that I usually use. Most of the brooches that I make are made with this, which is 8, I believe. But when you get up to this big for making brooches, yeah, I had to check to make sure that was a 4. I have some metal that's a little bit bigger than that, but not too much. I used to be able to get larger metal easily. I can no longer get it easily in a roll. I buy the small stuff in rolls like this. These are £1 a piece. And then the bigger stuff comes in coils like this. So this, for instance, is a 8 gauge. And yeah, that's £1 of wire. I buy by the pound because it doesn't make sense for me to be fiddling around with ounces. The only time I buy in ounces is if it's something small. Even this was £1. This is stainless wire. I sell, when I am teaching, smaller containers for my students, because if they're buying a roll of wire, say they've started a project and they want to keep doing this project when they get home, for less than $10 they could buy a roll of wire that will keep them for a very long time, because it'll have, 50 yards of wire on it or something like that. But for a professional who makes a lot of chains and links and brooches and pins and all kinds of other stuff, buying by the pound makes sense. Now, say I want to make not seeing the end, there it is. I want to make a hook. It depends on how fat I want that hook to be, how sturdy I want it to be, as to which wire I will choose to make it from. One of the things I try to do is not bend and unbend this wire too often, because it gets to the point where it's crinkly and then I wind up having to cut off a piece. And that is one of the things that that hobbyists have to learn is not to be crinkling your wire all the time. You're better off wrapping a piece of tape around it that won't leave a residue, like the blue painter's tape. Or just tying it in place with a zip tie, or a tie like you get on a, what would you call it? The little wire ties that you used to get on some brands of bread. You still get it on some of the brands of bread that don't want to have plastic involved. Because I've done this a million times, I will work directly off the roll, and what that allows me to do is not waste wire. If you are a beginner, sometimes it is easier to work with a piece of wire than it is to work with an entire pound of wire sitting there. So if I was going to be a beginner, I might cut off a piece. Now the danger with that is when you're starting, you really don't have a sense for how big your thing is going to be. Now, if it doesn't matter, if I'm making a whole bunch of different things and I'm going to be able to vary the size of those hooks and stuff depending on how gigantic my necklace is, that's fine. I'm going to, and you have to size your cutters to your wire too. So this is a pretty sturdy piece of wire here. Now, I'm going to just chomp a piece off of here on the theory that I won't waste much. And as you can see, it's not straight, it's not pretty, but we're going to make it functional. Now, your most basic wire loop is just going to literally be these are round nose pliers. I'm going to roll it up like that. If I'm concerned about this being sharp at all, I could choose to use a file on it. Most of the cutters that I use around here are pretty smooth to start with and leave a smooth end. But if I was concerned, I could file it with a small file. I have plenty of small files hanging around. And you do not have to spend a fortune on files. The files that I take with me to events were bought at Harbor Freight. You can get an entire set of them. I haven't priced them in forever. I would be surprised if they were $20. I would be surprised. Well, maybe I wouldn't be surprised anymore, but they certainly were not $20 when I bought them. So for less than 20 bucks, you can get a selection of probably 8 or 10 files in different sizes and shapes. Now, these are not going to be the highest quality files on the planet, but they're going to be more than adequate for your average jewelry project. Any file, whether you're spending 60 bucks for a file or $6 or 60 cents, I don't think you can buy one for 60 cents anymore, will be brittle because of the way the metal has been handled. So don't ever pry with a file. If you pry, you will break off the ends. That's a bad thing. So I've got my little loop. I'm going to squish it a little bit to see if I can make that a little bit smaller than it is. Now, it's not going to squish, it's just going to slide. So what I can do, I've made it as tight as it's going to go in this form. And then I'm going to stick it in farther up on these. You'll notice these are tapered, they're smaller at the end, they're bigger at the base. Same with this kind. And I have a gazillion different sizes and shapes and everything else of these. They don't have to be expensive. I was just thinking about whether I had some of my cheapies. I have some ancient ones that I've had for probably 25 years that are from Pakistan, and as a beginner it was fine. It was just when I started doing a lot of work that I wanted to have padded handles, because you know you're beating up your hands all the time, so getting the padded handles that are ergonomically correct was a good plan. Now all I'm doing here is I'm bending that. So okay, now to turn this into something I can actually use, this is actually sharp. So I'm going to use a file. Now you'll notice this file has a handle, this file doesn't. A lot of files when they come do not have handles. My cheapy ones from Harbor Freight do have handles. They have little cast-on plastic handles, which are adequate. If you have problems with your hands because of arthritis or anything like that, switching up to a larger handle is a good idea. You will have to pay for it though, or you could make it. I feel like I'm a advertisement for jewelry supplies right now. This is a product that is a thermoplastic. Okay, I have used jet and a jet ballistic, and there's several different editions of it, so to speak, over the centuries here. It is simply a product that comes, let me put this down here so I don't drop everything. Keeping things clean. That's what it looks like. It is a thermoplastic. Thermoplastic simply means that it is plastic that will soften when you put it in hot water. Now, if I had a tiny little, some of the small files, do I have a small file here? I have that little guy here, but he requires a different kind of handle. But if I had one that, say, had a handle, but it was a tiny little handle, say the size of a pencil, something like, this is an old handle off a paintbrush that I have down here for those weird things that you need sometimes. But say it had a handle about this size, and either because I have arthritis or some other handicap in my hands, I can't tolerate having to grab something small like that, or maybe I can't hold it like that the way I would want to for fine precision work. I could take that jet ballistic, I could follow the instructions carefully, get it warmed up, and literally form it around here. It will get soft, not as soft as modeling clay, but kind of. And you could literally form it around here and have it solidify so that your handle is now, you know, an inch, inch and a half in diameter. So it's kind of like when you buy inexpensive kitchen tools, and sometimes they're a little uncomfortable in your hands. They work really well, but they're a little uncomfortable. You can go buy the OXO handle tools, OXO. Again, I get nothing from these people. I just have some OXO tools that have a bigger handle so that you're not having to close your hand as far. It gives you a better grip if you have any kind of issues with your hands. So that's another save your fingers tip. So back to our little hook here. There's our little hook as it stands right now. I need to file this guy off here. So I'm going to use this. When I got this file, do I have any that doesn't have a handle on it? No, I've put handles on all of these. They came without a handle. And I buy these handles separately from Rio. I'm trying to think if I've seen anything like that at Harbor Freight. I don't remember. This kind of stuff I just buy from Rio because it makes sense for me. I'll just throw it into an order that I've already got going. But that allows me to have something large to grip instead of me trying to sit there like this and file, which is sort of annoying. How about very annoying? Because I do this all the time, I know that I can brace my arm against my side, hold it like this, and file. If you are not accustomed to filing, I recommend that you brace it against something. And I recommend that that thing be something that you don't mind if you accidentally hit it with a file.